What's up guys? Vivo took most of the smartphone industry by surprise by unveiling its Apex concept phone, then releasing it as a full-fledged product only a few months later. The result, the Vivo NEX S. It has a really innovative design, but is it any good as an actual daily driver? I'm Will for GSM Marina, and this is our Vivo NEX S review. The Vivo NEX S has a gently sloped glass back and an aluminum frame. From this angle, it doesn't seem too out of the ordinary for a 2018 phone. But flip it over and you start to see what the buzz is all about. A huge display takes up the whole front surface, with minimal bezels and no notch. Part of what makes this possible is the innovative setup for the selfie cam. It sits inside of the body and pops out when you need it, sort of like the periscope of a submarine. Unlike a submarine though, this device isn't watertight. But the camera's up and down motion is smooth and actually sort of fun. It even has some optional sound effects. The assembly feels sturdy, and Vivo boasts they can withstand up to 100 pounds of force, but probably better not to sit on it. There's no earpiece taking up precious space on the front of the NEX S. The phone relies on an internal piezoelectric setup to generate sound for calls, and it doesn't sound bad. Another futuristic feature aiming to shave off the bezels is the under-display fingerprint reader. Sadly, it's pretty slow compared to traditional readers and not too reliable. It feels bad to have to try multiple times to wake up your phone. There is no face unlock feature available on the NEX S. All of these space-saving innovations have come together to allow for the NEX S's massive screen. It's a 6.6-inch AMOLED with a 1080p resolution and a tall 19.3:9 aspect ratio. Even though it's only 1080p and with 388 ppi, the display still looks amazingly sharp and has punchy colors and really deep blacks. It isn't too color accurate with no options for making color adjustments. You'll have to get used to the saturated reds and yellows. Maximum brightness in the default mode is just shy of 460 nits, and sunlight legibility is great. We've seen a few phones score higher, but the NEX S is perfectly usable in the sun. The screen also has an always-on display showing you the time and notifications. It's convenient, and can be customized in settings. Not everything is next-gen on this phone, and we still have a 3.5mm jack for headphones. Volume is below average, but there's almost no distortion. Otherwise, we have a single loudspeaker on the bottom next to the USB-C port. A stereo setup would be nice, but tough to do with this all-screen design. In any case, the speaker is pretty loud, and music has little to no distortion. The NEX S runs on a state-of-the-art Snapdragon 845 chipset and 8GB of RAM. As expected, it runs great, and there are no surprises and benchmarks. The phone keeps cool, and it performs just as well as its flagship competitors. Storage-wise, the NEX S has either 128 or 256 gigs of internal memory, depending on the model. This isn't expandable though. Now on to Vivo's OS. It's FunTouch 4 over Android 8.1 Oreo, and about as far from stock as we've seen in an Android phone, looking more like iOS with a bunch of added features. You can navigate using the regular on-screen buttons or opt to use gestures. Swipe up from the center to go home, and swipe up and hold to open the task switcher. Swiping up from the left side goes back, and swiping up from the right opens the control center. So yeah, instead of having settings and quick toggles in the notification shade at the top, here they're housed in the control center at the bottom, just like iOS, along with a row of recent apps. The default app package is pretty huge on this phone. Without Google Play services in China, Vivo had to develop quite a few things by itself. Some standard apps like the phone app, album, and video player work well, but others like the browser are clearly not set up for a Western user experience. In the Chinese ROM, there's a lot of other bloatware too. Besides Weibo, Baidu, and Alipay, there's actually an entire folder just full of random apps. Even more stuff is hidden away behind the scenes as various services. Thankfully, most can be uninstalled. Swiping over to the left opens customizable panels, which can display things like weather, news, and reminders. It's part of Vivo's digital assistant named Jovi, and like Samsung's Bixby, it has its own dedicated hardware button, and no, it can't be remapped. For now, Jovi operates in Chinese, but is supposed to set alarms, make reminders for events, and toggle and switch certain settings by voice control. It's also present on the camera, and can analyze the on-screen content and provide searches, sort of like Bixby Vision. But speaking of dedicated buttons, the Smart Click feature is pretty convenient. You can map any custom feature or action to a long press of the volume down button. One major issue we found with the OS is its heavy security, which prevents you from sideloading apps or a new launcher without a complicated process involving a Chinese phone number. It's really stingy about permissions too, sometimes asking you to authorize a new app every time you launch it. The NEX S has a big 4000 mAh battery and is pretty power efficient. It scored an excellent 101-hour endurance rating in our proprietary tests. Charging this large battery isn't a problem either. With the provided 22.5 watt charger, we went from 0 to 50% in half an hour. There is no wireless charging though. The vivo NEX S has a dual camera setup, though the 5-megapixel secondary camera is only used to provide depth in portrait mode. The main camera is f1.8 and 12 megapixels, with dual pixel phase detection autofocus and OIS. There's a pro mode for still photos, where you can adjust ISO, shutter speed, white balance, and manual focus. In daylight, photos come out okay, but we expected more out of a flagship device. Noise suppression is quite heavy, and resolve detail is rather low, with some softness throughout the frame. But even in good lighting, there is still some visible noise, and dynamic range is surprisingly limited. Clouds and shadows often get clipped, even with the AI-driven HDR turned on. The portrait bokeh shots using both cameras are alright, but not all that impressive. The background is nicely out of focus, though the edges around the subject sometimes end up blurry. In low light, we again weren't impressed by the NEX S. Despite having OIS, everything gets particularly blurry and fuzzy, and often even out of focus. Now onto the 8-megapixel selfie cam, which has fixed focus. While we applaud Vivo for its cool mechanics, the actual performance of the front-facing snapper is rather disappointing. Selfies come out soft, with limited dynamic range. There's some noticeable noise, and shots often come out overexposed. It has its own portrait mode too, and the defocusing looks about as convincing as that on the main cam. Video can be recorded in 4K or 1080p at 30 FPS. There's no 60 FPS option on this phone. The NEX S actually does a pretty good job here. There is some noise and a tendency to overexpose, but quality is flagship grade. And the 4-axis OIS grants decent stabilization even in 4K. So, the NEX S. We've got to hand it to Vivo for stepping out of the box and delivering a fresh new smartphone design with an awesome bezel-less notchless display. We also get great battery life, a loud speaker, and the fast processing you expect from a flagship. It's not perfect though. There's no waterproofing, the fingerprint reader can be frustrating, and we expected more from the camera. But the feature that could be a turn-off for users is FunTouch OS. Sure, it provides a lot of features, but in its current state, it's overwhelming and a bit chaotic. Out of the box, users shouldn't be expected to make a bunch of customizations, bypass security, or sideload apps and files, just to have something that feels friendly and usable. Until Vivo revises the OS or releases an international ROM, we can't really recommend this phone. But still, it showcases a neat design that has us hopeful for the future. Thanks for watching. Hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And you're always welcome to stop by gsmarina.com for our full test findings. See ya!